279 with Mr. Ben Westhoff, author of Fentanyl Inc. And I've also been doing this with a lot of guests where I ramble on like an idiot. So before I even start, how about you introduce yourself, sir?
Well, I'm Ben Westhoff. I'm an investigative journalist, and I am the author of Fentanyl Inc., as you mentioned, which is about the fentanyl epidemic, the third wave of the opioid crisis, which is now killing more Americans annually than any drug in history. I've also written a couple books about hip hop, most recently Original Gangsters, about NWA, Tupac, and the birth of
Hell yeah.
West Coast.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. Hold on one second, make sure the audio. I thought I was getting feedback. Fentanyl Inc. is, and for everybody listening, Fentanyl Inc. will be, as always, will be in the description and sticky in the top comment. Awesome Audible book. As an Audible connoisseur, I loved it. No problems with it. Wonderfully done. It's, aside from being terrifying, it's also sexy. It's like you almost don't want it to be sexy, but it is sexy. It's yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think the other drugs are sexier, really. Fentanyl is kind of like people die from it and they didn't even mean to take it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. Not the drug. The drug isn't sexy. The drug isn't it's not a cocaine at a nightclub. It's not like a nice glass of whiskey. No, I would say more so your story is sexy, right? It's the guys that are like, dude, I don't even see the product that I make. Like, it's not good, but it's sexy in the same way that like Goodfellas is sexy. Like, murder's not good, but man, like they make it look good in like a nice suit, right? That's what I mean. Is the dealers don't touch it. It's not even online. I sell it here. I have pseudonyms here. I'm making this much money. It's, meeting up with a Mexican cartel in a parking lot and you switch cars. The story is sexy. The drug is not. No, the drug is you just drop dead.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a whole different paradigm than we're used to. Everybody knows the stories of like Pablo Escobar and El Chapo, but these Chinese synthetic drug traffickers, which is where almost all of the illicit fentanyl comes from, they're like regular businessmen, and they're not, cartel members. They don't have guys with AK-47s guarding the door. They're a lot of the drugs that they're selling are legal and under Chinese law, and so they are always kind of scrambling to stay within the law. So whenever a new drug gets banned, they stop selling that one, and then they make a new one. And there's a lot of kind of nerdy chemical stuff involved with their businesses, but the money being made is certainly huge amounts.
Yeah. I mean, I graduated the University of Georgia in 2013. I was a biology major, got into medical school and pharmacy school. That stuff was all right in my wheelhouse. So listening to him, yeah, you're right. It's not rubber banding hundreds of dollars of bills with gold plated AKs. It's like, it looks like a big pharma lab, like white gloves, fume hoods, beakers, mass spectrometers, IR spectroscopy, nuclear spectroscopy, organic chemistry, looking at the duration, the time lapse of the chemical reaction, the change in colors. Yeah, it seems like a normal business almost.
Right, absolutely. And the chemistry is the kind of at the crux of the problem, like the lack of the information, So when someone dies from fentanyl, a lot of times they intended to take another drug. Fentanyl is cut into the heroin or the meth or the cocaine they're taking. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the user who doesn't know. The drug dealer selling them the drug usually doesn't know how much or if any fentanyl is in there. And then the regional distributor doesn't know either. It has to go all the way back to the source, which is usually the Mexican cartels buying these Chinese chemicals, mixing it themselves. Those are the only people who often even know how much fentanyl is in these drugs.
Yeah. And you answered my question in your book, a question that I've had like personally about fentanyl for a while. I was always, someone that's really never done more, took acid once or a couple times, but like I've never jumped into any of that shit. I know some people that have, but point is from my, sheltered private school view, I was always like, why would they want it? That just seems like poor business 101. Why would you kill off your customers? And then obviously it's like, oh, well, it's so powerful, you only need a little bit to cut with your actual, and then it's like, I feel stupid, but I never actually thought until your book, hearing the firsthand reports of people doing fentanyl. It's the people with massive tolerances. It's like, oh, dude, it not, it wasn't just that it got rid of the sickness and the chills. I got high, I got high as fuck, and it's like, oh, like it's that ever, and because it's so tiny, you can just add a little. You're removing the problem of tolerance. You can just, which is great for pain management, but also for addicts. And I feel silly, but it took me until 30 years old to realize, like, oh, that's why it's so popular. But then it's also because it's so tiny and because it's not legal and it's not, we got to get the Mr. Coffee bean with a certain amount of grind, right? And it spins at a certain rate. It's like, oh, you guys are doing like nuclear. This is like making a nuclear bomb, and it's like, you can't be eyeballing this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's a huge problem. The fentanyl that people take in hospital settings, it's all like very safe. It's completely safe. Yeah. There's people whose job it is to correctly mix these solutions and administer them, anesthesiologists. But your average drug dealer and drug trafficker doesn't have this training, doesn't have the tools to do it right. And like you said, you would need a mass spectrometry. Man, I'm butchering that. Equipment just to be able to tell what's in this stuff, and no one really has the access to that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. Is like, I truly do believe that like we have to legalize everything. One, because just in general, I'm more of like I think you should be able to. We're adults. You want to own a gun, own a gun. You want to smoke meth, smoke meth. It's like, you have your property. We have rules for you can't drive intoxicated. I think that it's just, as in general, as an aside, it's like, I think we're adults and I can do with my life what I want to. I'm on this planet spinning through space with you. Let me do what I want. I'll pay my taxes and I'll obey the rules. But that's an aside. But you provided perfect examples of what happens when it's legal. You know what's in it. There's a harm reduction. There's awareness. It's, hey, don't do this. It's, come here. We'll test it for you. Oh, there you go. Yeah, no, it's clear. Oh, it's, hey, don't do that. That's got rat poison in it. Like, it seems like that's the way to go.
I think when I grew up in the DARE program and just the general sort of just say no era, we were taught to really believe that all drugs will kill you. And, some people respond to that message, but I think most kids don't. Once most kids find out that, smoking a little marijuana is really not going to kill me, they start to doubt all the messages.
Yes.
And I think kids are smart enough to be able to handle a little nuance, and they can understand that, like, if you tell them, if they know you're being honest and you tell them, listen, any pill, any powder that you buy on the black market these days could have fentanyl in it and it could kill you, that message is going to be something they're willing to hear.
Yeah. The comedian Duncan Trussell said that, and I remember that from several years ago, and that always stuck with me, is like, when you grow up hearing that, like, you smoke marijuana, you're going to be dead by Christmas. You're going to be selling out your sister to prostitution and breaking into banks. And then you smoke it and you're like, dude, I just listened to Pink Floyd or watched Anchorman and laughed my ass off. And you're like, with this, there's nothing wrong with this. And then you see the same government official or the same teacher and saying, don't smoke marijuana because you know what? And then they also say, and don't smoke meth. And all of a sudden you're going, well, they just lied through their teeth because that pot was awesome. Well, then you go and smoke meth, or you do PCP, or you get one of these RC chemicals. It's some enantiomer, methyl oxyl, whatever, and you take it. No one's ever taken it before. And you take a microgram and you drop dead. And it's like, that is a problem. Because if you just said, hey, pot, like alcohol, in moderation, be safe, okay. And then if you then came out and said, but you really do got to be careful about buying stuff with Bitcoin from China, well, you would take that to heart. And it's, yeah. Yeah,
there's also the unintended consequences of the drug war, too. When you think about all the people in Mexico who have been the byproduct of cartel violence, the trafficking from Colombia, these are innocent people. These are people who are, working for the cartels unintentionally. There's all the border trafficking. And it's, I think it was Milton Friedman, the conservative economist, who said that basically drug laws literally, enrich the cartels. That's what the laws were designed to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, no. The one thing you could do to just wipe out cartels is just make it all legal here. Who the hell is going to risk their life running pot across the border when you can just waltz on down to CVS, get a Sprite and like a bag of OG Kush? Like, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, this idea that like if I don't know how legalizing fentanyl would look. I don't know if you could buy it in a CVS or something, but like take what's that stuff, Everclear? Everclear is about the strongest booze you can buy, right? But people aren't like rushing to the liquor stores and like buying Everclear. People have common sense.
Yeah, I mean, in college, I remember freshman year at Valdosta State University, they had jet fuel. It was Everclear and an orange slushy. And you would drink that, and it was like, if you have that, that's the last one you're having tonight. And they like wouldn't serve you because they could tell because your mouth would be orange. But I worked at a liquor store for like 6 months this year. Yeah, there was Everclear. I don't think I ever once stocked that shelf. Maybe one frat boy bought it one time. But you're right. No one's, let's go get. I have drank less. I drank more between the ages of 16 and 21 than I did between 21 and 30. And it's not, we can buy alcohol now. It's, it's I've never bought a cigarette. I rarely smoke pot anymore. But it's just, we're not going to be rushing to it, right?
I think cigarettes are a great example because that's an example of something that was, has always been legal. Mm-hmm. But it's been sort of taxed and regulated down to the point where fewer people die from cigarettes every year.
Yeah.
And that's, seems like a good example for other drugs.
Yeah. And you're still free to go get it. If you want to go have a stoke, go get it. You're still allowed to do it. And it's what I always think, and you brought it up with the drug war, is that it's like, let's look at alcohol prohibition. Like there's this, so for anyone out there that's maybe not about, drinking and smoking, like you may be conservative, fiscally conservative. Well, it's like, this makes sense. This isn't just some like, this liberal idea. It can also be a fiscally conservative idea. We spend, let's just say $100, obviously that's off by orders of magnitude. Let's say we spend $100 a year on the drug war. If you're not doing the drug war, there's $100 you no longer have to spend. And there's also X amount of dollars you can get from taxing. So you're putting less agents in the field to fight an Al Capone who's armed with Tommy guns and a bunch of moonshine to you can tax it. Not only that, how many people are in jail and not contributing to the, if you really want to just break it down into cold economics, how many people are in jail not contributing to the GDP? How many fathers and mothers are out there not present in their child's life, who then that may most of the time leads them astray? They don't have a strong father figure or a strong mother figure. And not only that, how much more money are we paying as a taxpayer to keep those jails going? We have the highest incarceration rate in the world. It's this whole thing that it's like, you don't even have to be for peace and love. Like, you can be a teetotaler. This just makes, like, economic sense. Knock out the cartels, tax it. Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, and you're right. I don't know what fentanyl would look like legal. But, I mean, I would let...
Yeah, I mean, the things that I think the drug war, sort of ending down or ramping down the drug war, would also benefit is a lot of medical science. And I talk about that in Fentanyl Inc. too. Yeah. There's a bunch of psychedelics. The reason LSD was first manufactured was because people thought it would have a lot of potential impact on psychology and related fields. And it did, in the first decades of its existence. It was basically the counterculture and Timothy Leary who kind of gave it a bad name in the mainstream press. But there's been something of a revival in recent years, and particularly with something like magic mushrooms, psilocybin.
Yeah.
These drugs have never, no one's ever overdosed and died from these drugs, and they kind of can be portals into how the brain works. And these studies are really promising, helping people, quit smoking or quit using cocaine and drugs like MDMA, which is ecstasy, have really helped with PTSD. And it really seems like that stuff should be available at least for, medical use.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak on that personally. December 2013, right after I graduated college, got into med school. Was like a top honor student. Deep down, wasn't happy. Knew I wasn't happy, but I was like checking off the boxes of success on paper. I'm going to be a doctor. I have abs. I have a hot girlfriend. It's like, I'm doing the thing. I'm going to have a white picket fence and a Mercedes Benz. But it was like deep down, I was like, I fucking hate every moment of my life. And I knew that for a while. So I finally kind of grabbed my balls and was like, I was terrified of psychedelics, but I went up with one of my best friends and we took a small dose, 2 dried grams of psilocybin up at his lake house. Nice sunny day. Went up. We knew no one else would be around. It was a weekday. We just walked around. And I remember we sat in a field and we meditated for like a couple hours. And I came out of that and was like, if I'm smart enough to get into medical school, I was like, I'm smart enough to like find something I love and make money off of it. Like life doesn't have to be miserable. And it took 7 years.
That's really cool. What kind of, how did you do like a formal meditation, or did you just kind of?
I've been meditating every day for 12 years. So that was 7 years ago. So that was I don't know, formal, informal, whatever. I normally sit there, it takes about 20 minutes for my mind to kind of calm down. And then I'll open my eyes so I don't fall asleep. I kind of do some observation. I am here. I am now. And then I try to focus on the fact that I am, like that which can't be spoken, like the subjective, like there isn't nothing. I am. And I just kind of went in, and there's like, it just unlocked, like you said, it just unlocked this part of my brain that was like, hey, like, it's like a dog that's been beaten by its owner, and then someone adopts it and they're very nice to it. And the dog takes a while to start to like open up. That's almost kind of how I felt. I was like, hey, like life doesn't have to be, like hard work doesn't have to be equated with misery. Like if I'm not miserable, I'm not working hard enough. Like something clicked in my mind that was like, dude, like life can be love. Like you still have to pay your bills. You're still going to have bad days. You're still going to clash with your friends and your parents. But it was like, and this is from someone that had been at that point meditating every day for 5 years. It took psilocybin and it just unlocked. And that was 7 years ago. And as of 20...
so many stories like that. It's really crazy. I mean, it's, you talk to people who in their whole life, psychedelic experience is one of their like top most memorable things.
Yeah.
And, nobody knows exactly how the pathways work and all that, but isn't it worth at least studying?
Yeah. Well, right after I graduated, a couple months after I graduated, I lost my oldest sibling to suicide. And
that's rough.
Yeah, it was intense, man. And I did psilocybin on like the 1 year anniversary of his death, because I figured, I was like, what is worse than like, the actual death, like the 1 year anniversary, this sucks. And I remember in my mind, I was like, what would be the worst thing? What would be like the worst trip? Because they're always like set and setting. You got to be in a good place. But then I started thinking, I was like, man, you don't call 911 when you're in a good place. You call them when you're in an emergency. I was like, if these are as powerful as I know they are, like, why don't I go in at the worst time in my life and take these? Maybe it will be the worst trip ever. And if that's the case, if I survive it, nothing else in life can bother me. What would be worse than doing mushrooms on the 1 year anniversary of your brother's suicide? And I did it. No fear. It was, still had years of grieving left, but truly like came to peace with it at a level that like I hadn't ever reached before. And 13, 14, and 15 and 16, I did psychedelics once a year for 4 years. That's it. Haven't touched them in 6 years. Now here I am doing a podcast, and in the last month or so, I finally turned it into a source of revenue. Enough so where by this summer I should be able to move out of my parents' house and live on my own. But the point is like, life can only be misery to 4 doses over 4 years.
Yeah.
Making money doing a podcast, talking to badass authors like yourself. Like,
Well, yeah, I learned the most about this when I visited the home and lab of Sasha Shulgin, who is
Oh
the
shit.
godfather of psychedelics. Basically, he's often called the godfather of
Mm-hmm.
ecstasy, but he didn't really like that term.
Yeah.
But he was a
Yeah.
chemist at Dow Chemical, and so they were, the ones who
Yeah.
developed napalm and Agent Orange and things like
Yeah.
that. And he developed. He was pretty straight laced at first, and
Yeah.
he developed an insect killer that made them a lot of money. So they let him do whatever he wanted. So he basically went into studying these different chemicals which affected brain function and psychedelics. And at first, he was publishing scientific papers about these drugs and with under the name of Dow Chemical.
Yeah.
And he, provided drugs that like the Hells Angels distributed at this San Francisco rally.
Yeah.
All these people kind of took too much and overdosed,
Yeah.
but then he finally, Dow Chemical was like, all right, that's kind of enough. And so he moved on to this lab on his own property in the woods and developed over 100 brand new psychedelics in the coming years. And what he would do was he would take the chemical structure of known psychedelics like different tryptamines, phenylethylamines,
Tical.
Yeah, exactly. And he would he'd take like mescaline and he would just slightly tweak the chemical structure so that you had something that was similar to mescaline, but it had a different reaction. And then he would test it on himself and his wife.
Yeah.
And they would start with a really tiny dose. Nothing happened, increase the dose until finally he feels something. And then he would sort of write his observations. And this was not, typically the way science is done, but he couldn't test it in good faith on other people. And if you test these drugs on animals, they're not going to give you the reaction you want. But eventually, he came onto ecstasy very early after it was popularized, and he started sharing it with all these psychiatrists he knew. And these psychiatrists shared it with others, and they had all these sessions where their patients would have the most profound breakthroughs of their lives. And this was in the early 80s by now, when ecstasy was still legal, MDMA, and they would sell it in bars even, like this place in Texas, where you could get like a gin and tonic and 2 ecstasy tablets, and that would be on your bill. The FDA kind of got scared off by, these kind of random horror stories, which they always do, and consulted studies that weren't really applicable. So they ended up banning it in the mid 80s. But, the power of the drug, it's a hard thing because so much of what's called ecstasy that's out there right now is not pure MDMA at all. And if somebody sells you what's called ecstasy or Molly, it could have fentanyl, it could have something else. And so I always tell people to use what are called drug checking kits. They have fentanyl testing strips, and they have these kits. I talk about them in Fentanyl Inc. a lot. There's a company I really like called the Bunk Police.
Yeah.
And you can just Google them, and they have really affordable, really effective kits.
Yeah.
And I will tell you immediately if you've got real ecstasy or some adulterant. But, people who've used real ecstasy, especially in a supervised lab setting, have had, like we've been saying, these really profound reactions.
Yeah, Bunk Police. What were the other ones? Dance Safe.
Dance Safe has some too. Yeah.
Was it Energy? Was that one of them? Was it just called
Energy Control in Spain? Yeah, they'll test your drugs for you. You can send them your drugs, and they'll. You have to live in Spain for it to be free, but others can send it for a cost.
Yeah, I went to Tomorrow World in 2014 in Atlanta, and I remember seeing people. Tomorrow World was such a trip. I didn't even need to do anything. I just went there and I felt high. But yeah, they had testing strips there and shit. But like, it's kind of weird. You see everyone in like bunnies and half naked girls and angel wings, but they're doing like OChem. You're like, what is going on? But
they're doing what? Oh, OChem.
Because they're all in their, like rave. They're all girls are in their rave boots and bikinis. But meanwhile, they're there like testing shit and looking. And I'm like, what is going on in my life? But yeah, I was gonna say with
Yeah, in places in a lot of places in Spain, as I wrote, you don't even have to test it yourself. They have a station.
yeah.
You bring it right up there. They test it for you. They say come back in an hour.
Yeah.
If you can wait that long not to take your drugs,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know get
Yeah.
the results.
Yeah, and it's with therapy and stuff. I mean, yeah, you talked about Timothy Leary. Have you ever read any or listened to any Ram Dass, Richard Alpert? Timothy Leary's like best friend at Harvard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Richard Alpert's got some. He died last year. He was like 90 something. But I loved his. I'll email it to you. I love his like 15-minute recount of like meeting Timothy Leary and then them taking mushrooms together. It's a thing of beauty. I've listened to it like 1,000 times.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I would be interested in that.
Oh yeah, he's like, and I became drinking partners with a man, and his name was Timothy Leary, this mad little Irish man. He's like, but yeah, he's like, yeah, taking mushrooms, and he goes, I remember I had met him, and he was sitting in a field, and he goes, Richard, I just ate these mushrooms, and he goes, I've learned more in 7 hours than I have in 27 years of cognitive psychiatry. And he was like, so we canceled our like trip to Mexico, we just did mushrooms, but. Yeah,
Timothy Leary is such an interesting character. It's like he was really kind of revered by my parents' generation for a while, but then he like really fell out of favor, I think, with a lot of the harm reduction activists or people who want to see these drugs legalized, and they kind of blame him for making a spectacle of everything and making the straight world turn out. But I think there's another sort of little revision about Timothy Leary now. People are sort of going beyond the public image and reading what he actually had to say, and there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff there.
Yeah. Richard Alpert Ram Dass, he talks about how they kind of went their different ways in like the 70s, but yeah, I mean, I love Ram Dass, but yeah, point being is with therapy, have you read anything about MAPS? Rick Doblin, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the future of psychiatry. Yeah.
So do I. I mean, they've really done groundbreaking work, Rick, and then there's what's the other organization with David Nichols that I talk about in the book. They too have really pushed the envelope in terms of doing psychedelic studies, and I think countries like I heard Norway was on a fast track to legalize MDMA for medical use, and I honestly think the tide is turning so quickly in this country even that if you told me that in 10 years the whole U.S. had legalized psychedelics or MDMA for medical use, I would honestly believe you.
Yeah, by 20. Oh yeah, I remember when they first decriminalized marijuana. I was like, this is the foot in the door. I was like, you can't, because now the internet exists. You can't put it back in the bottle like the 60s.
Yeah, I remember listening to Cypress Hill's album. They had that song "Legalize It."
Yeah.
And I was 93,
yeah.
and I was like, come on, that's pie in the sky. Like, that's ridiculous. They're never going to legalize it. And then in California, 3 years later, it was medical marijuana passed. So it happened so fast.
Yeah, it started slowly, and what took the reins was it wasn't just a bunch of hippies. What happened was people started making big money. And it was like, oh, there's money to be made in this. There's money to be made in head shops and medical marijuana and just high strain, just perfect purity, right? And then, was it Denver? Was it last year, 2 years ago, decriminalized psilocybin? And now that's spreading out. It's accelerating because now you're going to get more and more people, just the general like mass consciousness of people are going to be doing psilocybin more. I think we're going to see an acceleration in just technology as a whole, because what's going to happen is for every 100,000 people that try a new, let's say, decriminalized now, so let's say by 2030 it'll be legal, people that are going to try it, for every 100,000 there's going to be just people like you and me that just do it. Like, what a beautiful experience. But what's going to happen is you're going to start to get an Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. Well, Steve Jobs did LSD. They're going to do something, and they have the power to sort of potentiate their change in mindset, be it wages, be it green technology, one of these movers and shifters. So instead of just some girl ranting on Instagram, save the trees, save the whales, like, sure, that's great and everything. And you and I can sit here and go, peace and love, Timothy Leary. But what happens when like a Jeff Bezos does a heroic dose of mushrooms, right? That's when the world changes. That's when
I think there is a book or at least an article about the Silicon Valley and
sure.
LSD.
And innovation,
the rise of them both. Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. New York, you got like Adderall and cocaine, right? Vegas is like a ton of alcohol, and it's just innovation, microdosing. Yeah, it's insane. It's what's we just passed 30 minutes. I said I wouldn't keep you longer than that. And I realized I cut you off when you first started saying it. What's the other book you wrote about hip hop?
I have two. The first is the most recent is called Original Gangsters. Okay. It's about basically Tupac and NWA.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about, the crack cocaine era in the late 80s, the Crips and the Bloods. It's kind of how this whole, the Rodney King beating, the LA riots. It's how this whole sort of environment bred the music that became so popular, the birth of gangster rap. And I talked with all the surviving members of NWA and people close to Tupac. And have you seen Straight Outta Compton, the movie?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's kind of like the true story behind that. So, and then I wrote another one that's called Dirty South, and it's about Outkast, Lil Wayne, all the sort of the rise of Southern hip hop.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I lived in Atlanta for 15 years. Yeah. It's.
Oh yeah, I did a lot of reporting there.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. Well, dude, I'm gonna send you an email. I would definitely love to have you back on, and I'll grab NWA. I'll grab the hip hop one first. That one sounds interesting. I'd love to have you back on in like January or something. January, February, whatever works with you. I'll send you an email. We don't need to decide it right now. But
sounds good.
Yeah, man, and again, this is a one man operation. This is me and only me. And I say that to say, because of that, I only have on guests I want to have on. So I legitimately like your writing, and I'd love to have you back on. If I didn't, I'd be like, thanks, man, peace, and just not talk to you again. You're a good author, man. I like your work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your giving it such a close read.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it, dude. And yeah, that's the other thing. Authors always say, they're like, oh, you know the book well. I'm like, dude, if you're going to give me your time of day and give me content, I'm going to read your book and I'm going to take notes. Like, I treat it like, pre-med. I treat it like the MCAT. I'm like, if he's going to come on and talk about Fentanyl Inc., I'm going to know Fentanyl Inc. So I appreciate it, man. You're a good author. Everybody listen, check it out. It's a great book. It's quick listen. It's badass. It's scary as shit. That's the other thing. It actually did have an effect on me. In that in 2016, I did get like synthetic LSD online. That's the last time I did it.
Do you know what the exact drug was?
It was 1P LSD and I think LAD. And I got it from Lysergy. Okay. And that's the only time I'd ever used Bitcoin was I found it and I had it shipped from Lysergy. Yeah, it was 1P LSD, LAD, and there's one more. I did them separately. 4-ACO DMT, which was like a synthetic precursor to psilocin, not psilocybin. But yeah.
How were they?
They were fantastic. They were fantastic. I had some. Honestly, I did those, and that's when I realized I was like, it had been a couple years since I lost my brother, and I realized that they gave me the clarity that I was like, I'm not in a good place in life right now, and that's kind of what led me to like, I need to move home. I need to seek like a therapist. Like I need to get sober. They had a profound, as psychedelics do. They cut through all the bullshit.
I'm sure most of your listeners have never heard of the drugs you mentioned, but the bunk police, they're like so sophisticated. I like almost guarantee that they have tests for even the most obscure drugs like you mentioned.
Oh yeah, LAD, 1P LSD, like LAD 52. Oh yeah, no, it's all these enantiomers and shit. And I haven't done psychedelics since then, but listening to your book, it actually gave me pause, and I was like, what if that wasn't reputable? What if that was laced with something? And that scared the shit out of me. And I don't think I'm going to be ordering things online, but that is like, that's the problem though, right? Marijuana's bad, and you smoke it and you realize it's not bad. So then you have no problem ordering something online. And shit, what if it does kill you? But it's
Yeah. Well, in Fentanyl Inc., for Fentanyl Inc., I also went to China and I
yeah,
infiltrated
yeah,
a drug lab where they make fentanyl and fentanyl analogs, synthetic marijuana. And it was this whole process. I had to like win over this
yeah,
guy and convince him I was a drug
yeah.
dealer. And
You journalist?
it kind of reads like I don't know, like a crazy adventure, I think.
I thought you were gonna be the only reason I knew it didn't end badly is because I was listening to the book, and thus I know you survived. But dude, when you were talking about how you were seeing like street or highway signs in Mandarin, and you're like, I think we're going west, and he was like, "You a journalist? Are you a journalist?" Like, you were like, "Nope, nope, I'm a gangster," and he was like, "Journalist bad," and it's like, "Fuck," if I could do a more racist impression, but yeah, it's yeah, man, you talked about that, and I was like, "Fuck!" And then, yeah, car fentanyl and shit, man. They use the Spetsnaz. I remember reading about that years ago, and I didn't actually know that was real. Or was it Spetsnaz that they put it in the air system?
Oh,
In
you mean
Russia?
in Russia?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's crazy.
yeah,
The terrorists, they took all these people hostage
yeah,
in this theater, and they tried to just put everyone to sleep using aerosolized carfentanil and this other type of fentanyl, and it killed like 100 people.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I know I'm going over, but that's a tricky thing, right? Because you have to have everyone asleep, and you have to have everyone asleep instantly, which means you need like a common denominator, and it's use car fentanyl, which is like a pinprick of that will drop an elephant. And it's
Yeah, it
yeah,
was a very ill-conceived plan.
yeah. I mean, I guess in Russia, it's like fuck around and find out, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's no kidding.
yeah. But yeah. Everybody listen and grab it. It's a sexy book. It's a terrifying book, but it definitely shed a lot of light on it. Like I actually feel like I understand it more, and now I'm gonna be even that much more of a snooty, snobby prick on my podcast. I'm gonna be like, well, let me tell you about the enantiomers of fentanyl because now I have my PhD in fentanyl after reading your book. But yeah, man, I appreciate it. I'll it takes a couple hours to upload, so I'll send you a link and yeah, I'll send you an email and let's definitely do one on NWA and Tupac in January sometime.
I'd be happy to do it. That sounds great.
Fuck yeah, man. Ben Westhoff, thank you so much for coming on, sir. And yeah, everybody grab the book. Description, sticking to the top comment. It'll be in the thumbnail. It's a dope book. I've yet to recommend a bad book yet. So fuck around and find out. Fentanyl Inc. by Ben Westhoff. Thank you, sir.
All right, well, take care, Tommy.
All right, buddy. You too. Peace.
Okay.